Hello everyone, Tyler King here with a new episode of New Review. Today, continuing my series talking about my favorite releases throughout the year, I'm going to be talking about my 10 favorite reissues. Um, this one is pretty self-explanatory. It's any release that had been previously released that was then re-released this year. And I wanted to start out with my number 10 spot, Vienna by Ultravox. This one is a little bit unique because instead of having the actual original version of Vienna, what it does have is a remixed version by Steven Wilson, who is a respected musician in his own right, both with the band Porcupine Tree and with his own solo material, and he has done this album complete justice. One of the things that I tend to not like very much about when either bands go back and remaster or remix their own material, or when people like for instance what Giles Martin has been doing with the Beatles releases over the last few years, is that it takes away some of the nuances of the album. I know that there's a whole conversation that can be had about the quote unquote loudness war, but this is very beautifully done, is very tastefully done. Everything is not compressed. There are a lot of elements in certain songs that I probably hadn't noticed before, particularly in the opener Astrodyne, as well as songs like Sleepwalk get to be a little bit more driving, I guess would be the right word for it. And the title track sounds just as gorgeous as ever. Honestly, if you asked me what my favorite Ultravox album was, Vienna would probably be it. Maybe closely followed by Rage in Eden. But Steven Wilson did an excellent job with this. This was a Record Store Day release this year. I forget which drop it was in, but this is going to be my number 10 pick. The Vienna Steven Wilson mix by Ultravox. Up next is my number 9, which was also a Record Store Day release this year, and I believe that this is the only other Record Store Day release that I have on this list, which is going to be The Singles Plus by Skeletal Family. Skeletal Family was a relatively short-lived, I suppose you would call them goth slash post-punk band in the early through mid 80s. I had the pleasure of being able to see them on what is probably going to end up being their last US tour. That was about maybe 4 years ago now. And this, like the title would suggest, collects all of their singles plus a few other tracks. Trees, She Cries Alone, Waiting Here, of course, Promised Land, which is their quote unquote like biggest song. It is just incredible. I think that this is a band that more people should listen to, and I'm very glad that this release was given this reissue treatment because it is a very, very, very big treat. Up next, my number 8 pick. This is kind of an ongoing series, and that is the PJ Harvey reissue series. So here I have Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea, White Chalk, and the White Chalk demos. Her is not here because I'm personally not that big on that album, but I may end up getting it later just for completionist's sake. Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea is a PJ Harvey album that I originally was not very big on. For some reason, it just didn't really vibe with me, but re-listening to it, especially like this pressing of it, has given me much more of an appreciation for it. It has some of my favorite songs I think that she's ever done. The opener, Big Exit, is amazing. Good Fortune is great. The Whore's Hustle and the Hustler's Whore. The closing song, We Float. This Is Love. It is just, it's an amazing album. And one that I like even more than that is White Chalk. White Chalk is PJ Harvey's most, I would say, contemplative and ethereal sounding release. It is very piano driven. There is, I believe, some harpsichord in there, but it's mostly just piano and vocals. Opener The Devil, When Under Ether is easily top 5 PJ Harvey songs for me. To Talk to You, the piano, the mountain. It's just incredible, devastating material. It's so good. And I think that PJ Harvey's team is doing an amazing job repressing these, reissuing these, and getting them out. I'm very excited for next year, which is going to see the release of her album Let England Shake. I was very fortunate to be able to grab a copy of the demos album for that on her website. That comes with a signed lyric sheet. I've been trying to get those for a while, so I'm glad I finally was able to get one. If you haven't heard PJ Harvey's material, I don't know what to tell you. You are very much missing out. My number 7 spot is going to be Flood by Boris. I was very surprised when this album was released, or should I say when this reissue was released, particularly because it was done through Jack White's record label, Third Man Records. This album is kind of an outlier on this list because it isn't, like, quote-unquote, like, post-punk or goth or 80s or anything like that. This album actually originally came out in 2000. And the thing about this album is it really is one big piece. Unfortunately, due to the limitations of vinyl, it is a double record, so each side has each part of a piece on it, which makes sense because some of the CD pressings had it separated into 4 parts. This is like reflecting it at you guys. It is a singular ambient noise, I don't even, like, drone, guitar-based, just explosion. The first part is this very repetitive piece that starts out with this lone picked guitar line. Part 2 really is, to me, the best part of it. It's this very lush, almost orchestral feeling piece. And then parts 3 and 4 are just the build-up and explosion to it. It is a must-listen if you're into things like Sigur Rós or Explosions in the Sky, things like that, because I would argue that this album does it better than anything that most other quote-unquote like post-rock bands have done, and that is Flood by Boris. My number 6 pick is going to be another series, and that is one that I had done a video on before, but I don't think I ever really talked about the records themselves once they were released, and that is the Peter Murphy reissue series. So I just bought the ones that I didn't already have, which were Deep, Holy Smoke, Cascade, and the new compilation, The Last and Only Star, which is very big of Peter Murphy, but I mean, if there's one thing that can be said about him, it's that his ego is pretty large. Beautiful pressings. I don't hear any remastering. Everything sounds pretty much like how it's always sounded to me over the years when listening to the CD pressings or the digital or cassette versions of these albums. They're just beautiful records, beautiful albums. I mean, if you've seen my Peter Murphy review series, or if you even just know that I did a Peter Murphy review series, obviously I hold Peter Murphy and these albums in very high regard. And like I said when I was ranking all of these, there really is no bad Peter Murphy album except for Unshattered. So all of these are just top tier listens. I feel like they're already out of out of stock in most places. Hopefully, they're able to be repressed further down the line, maybe on just black vinyl, because I know that all of these were colored. Um, yeah, just phenomenal, exceptional albums, and I'm so glad that they are or were back being pressed because I mean, especially Cascade, that was going for something like $200 or $300 for an original pressing of it. Up next, my number 5 spot is another series, so please bear with me, and that is the My Bloody Valentine repressing series of all 3 of their albums, Isn't Anything, Loveless, and the MBV album. Remastered from the original analog source. You have these beautiful heavy jackets with this very beautiful gloss on them. And something else that I liked, which was an attention to detail, is that the jackets themselves, the inner jackets, I'm going to give you an example, kind of replicate the album artwork of whatever given album it is for. If you don't know My Bloody Valentine, I mean, if you're watching this channel, you should. Absolute pioneers in the shoegaze genre. Their album Loveless is generally considered not just the best shoegaze album of all time, not just one of the best albums of the 1990s, but one of the best albums of all time. Truly innovative music. It can be a little hard to get into if very powerful and crushing and dreamy and ambient guitar work is not something that you're either familiar with or into. But I think that the beautiful vocals by Belinda Butcher, the just sheer musicianship of the band, and being able to go back to it and really piece apart each song layer by layer by layer and hear something in them that you might not have heard before on repeated listens, that is, to me, one of the biggest beauties of My Bloody Valentine. And I mean, these hadn't been in production in a while, and just like with the Peter Murphy albums, I am so glad that they are back. They are still being pressed. I believe that you can still get them directly on the My Bloody Valentine website, and possibly also, you know, various independent retailers. My number 4 spot is going to be for an artist who I really have not mentioned before on this channel, and that is Akiko Yano. I'm going to try to pronounce this album as best I can. I got Nakucha Ne. And this album, it was recently repressed and remastered by the label We Want Sounds, who have been doing a lot of reissues and repressings and remasterings in regards to releases that are adjacent to the band Yellow Magic Orchestra. So, of course, if you've been watching my more recent videos on Yellow Magic Orchestra, you know where this is going. So Akiko Yano is actually the ex-wife of Yellow Magic Orchestra member Ryuichi Sakamoto. They did a lot of work together throughout the 1980s. She was actually a member of the live Yellow Magic Orchestra lineup, which you can hear on their album Public Pressure. And what a very unique thing about this album is that it features Steve Jansen, Mick Karn, and David Sylvian of the band Japan. David Sylvian only appears on the last song, but Steve Jansen and Mick Karn are on almost every single song on here. It's like this beautiful meeting of Akiko Yano's very like early Kate Bush-esque vocals and the musicianship of Japan, who to me are one of the best bands, definitely of the 1980s, possibly I would say of all time. Hello. My cat Smokey has decided to join us. This album sounds absolutely phenomenal. There's a beautiful booklet inside that has session photography, so you get to see Sakamoto, Akiko, Steve, and Mick Karn together. It's just an absolutely beautiful, phenomenal 80s album. And I would say that if you are into bands like Japan, Ultravox, and the like, this is probably something that you're going to enjoy. Also, if you're a fan of Kate Bush, which if you're not, I don't know how to help you with that. My number 3 reissue of the year is one that I already did a video on, and that is Nothing to Fear by Oingo Boingo. This was put out by Rebellion Remasters. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know that they saw the video that I had put up talking about it. We exchanged a couple messages back and forth on Facebook. What can I say? Beautifully done, beautifully remastered. It's just arguably maybe my favorite Oingo Boingo album, and I think that listening to this pressing of it in particular kind of cemented that opinion for me. And yeah, I just don't really want to talk too much more about it because I already dedicated an entire video to it. My number 2 spot is going to be the Sacred Bones deluxe pressing of Only Lovers Left Alive. I mentioned this album a little bit. I talked about it on my... I did my video of the most expensive albums in my collection. And so I don't want to go too much more into it because I feel like I talked about it pretty well there. But, I mean, it's a beautiful record. Lots of very meditative and contemplative guitar parts. You get some Middle Eastern instrumentation on the second disc. And something that I really didn't notice until getting this pressing and looking at the track listing is that the first side is sectioned as Detroit because that's where the first part of the movie takes place, and then the second part is labeled as Tangiers because that's where the second part of the movie takes place. So you get these two very beautiful and different but complementary sides of music on both the first disc on here and the second disc on here. It is a 45 RPM pressing, so do with that information what you will. It is just phenomenal, gorgeous work. And I mean, if you like Flood by Boris, you'll probably also like this. And that is my number 2 spot. My number 1 spot, I could be cheating on this because it is a box set. And that is going to be Godzilla, the Showa era soundtracks, 1954 to 1975. This thing has 18 records in it? Yes, 18 pieces of vinyl for, I believe, 15 movies. Throughout the original... I'm not even going to try to open it, actually, because it's so heavy. Of the original run of the Toho Godzilla series. Most are by Akira Ifukube, and say what you will of the Godzilla movies, I understand that, especially as the series goes on, it definitely began to cater more and more for children, but the music of the films, to me, always stuck with me. I grew up as a Godzilla fan. I had a few VHSs growing up, particularly of Ebirah, Horror of the Deep, otherwise known as Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. And a lot of the themes from the movies stuck with me over time, particularly Akira Ifukube's now iconic like theme of the original film. Um, so Waxwork Records did this insane box set. Um, I paid over a few $100s for it, but the contents are so worth it. Each record has its own unique coloring to it. The pressings are just beautifully silent. They're all supposedly pressed in mono. Whether or not the music itself was recorded in mono, I can't say for certain, but just the sheer volume of it, the sheer amount of music that you get with it. And of course, some of the scores are not going to be great, particularly stuff like, I remember I didn't really care for the Son of Godzilla score, and the score for Godzilla versus Hedorah, or Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. There's a lot of music on it, something like 60 individual songs. And so that really is more an issue more of like quantity over quality. But some of these, um, the first Godzilla score, the score for the second one, Godzilla Raids Again, um, Ifukube's work on King Kong versus Godzilla and Godzilla versus Mothra, some of the later, I mean, even the score for Ever a Horror of the Deep, which is a more surf rock influenced score, which I think is fitting given the more like tropical and nautical setting of the film. To me, that's one of the better scores because I want to say that was done by Masaru Sato. Um, it does something different than most of the scores that came in the later films, which were mostly by Akira Ifukube, just kind of copying and reworking themes that by that point we'd already heard a lot. Um, I'm getting way into this box set, more so than I thought I would. But it's gorgeous. I have no idea if it is still available on the Waxwork website, but if it is, and you are a fan of film scores or classical Japanese music, if you're a fan of like military marches, even, this is something that I think you should check out. And I know that the price tag is pretty high, so maybe listen to some of these albums individually if you can, whether it be on things like YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music. But if you're a Godzilla fan, if you're a fan of film scores, if you're a fan of box sets that are very unique, I would highly recommend this one, and that is why it is number one on my list of reissues of 2021. So, what do you think? Do you have any reissues that came out this year that you think I failed to include or that you would recommend? I'm always open to suggestions. I'm always open to comments. Please put them below. And if you like these videos, and if you want to support this channel in any way going forward, please feel free to sign up to my Patreon, which I'm going to put a link of in the video description below. You can get things like early access to my videos, custom review videos at the end of every month, Q&As, things like that. And thank you again for watching. I am Tyler King with New Review, and until next time, keep listening to great music.